First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. Great to meet everyone. I'm based in San Diego. My background, I think, a little bit deeper. Been in the industry 25 plus years. And the way I look at my career is, before I go to my book, is half of it has been in larger public companies, different executive roles, C-suite roles. Most recently, I was CTO of a $2 billion company called Sleep Number. Before that, I was in Cisco in Bay Area, Cisco Systems, and Hitachi-owned company. So there, I was fortunate enough to scale technology, customers, teams at a much larger, scale. And then the other half have been startups. So all the way from three guys in a room with great dreams, no windows, and slogging 100 hours to coming at Series A and scaling the team. So I've been fortunate enough that part of three different startups. All three went through M&A. So that was at least a good accomplishment because a lot of startups die. Like if you know the KPIs, how many startups die. So even just being M&A, whether it's a great M&A or not, it's a great accomplishment. That's kind of like on the work side. And I also dabble with angel investing for last 7+ years, mostly through funds in Southern and Northern California. And I think Manan mentioned. So I started this organization called TechCon Global. The idea was to create a platform for innovation and entrepreneurship and investment. So we bring top-notch speakers together and have dialogue about different technologies from AI to healthcare to SaaS, semiconductor. It's a pretty broad-based multi-track conference. Next year there will be two of them, one in Austin in February, early February, and then in May in San Diego. Would love to have you guys there. Now about the book. When I started thinking about this topic, the main driver was, I like storytelling. So for me, I like to write something that somebody who has no context can read the book and learn from it, but also somebody who's a domain expert can get some value out of it. So the main idea was more about like storytelling and progression about the evolution. So if you look at AI, since 2021, everyone is an AI expert now, right? It's an overnight sensation that's 50 to 70 years in the making. So I think one of the goals of the book was also to showcase the evolution. I mean, we are fortunate enough that we are living in a time where compute and data is so in abundance. They could have been done many years ago, but I think the bottleneck has always been data, high fidelity data, and compute constraints. It just says, when great things happen, it feels like it happened overnight, but there are many steps that brought us here. So main goal was to showcase that how many milestones were accomplished in the 50s, 70s, 90s, and now I think now we are on an exponential curve. The second goal was that generative AI or LLMs become a buzzword, but there are other modalities of AI also, deep neural networks, and others. And it's a mixture of all these technologies that are being used in healthcare, and you'll see a lot more acceleration of that. So I think the main idea was to tell a story, tell how it evolved, what were the key, I'll say, like fork in the road, or I'll say major changes. And then the biggest one, obviously, is the last 3+ years that we all are living through. And I think one thing is confirmed: the world will not be the same that it was, and it will be very different. Hard to predict. I mean, everyone can say, I can predict how. I'll give you an example. I was on the board, and we had a meeting, and the two examples. So the topic was, what are the risks? And this is 2019, and AI was number 6 on that list. And now, obviously, if you go to any company and say, what are the top risk or opportunity, the AI will be number 1, right? So it's not that everyone was aware. And then second example is when I was presenting to the board, we started using AI 2019, 2020, and we started building deep models to take different kind of data and build models to generate and predict different health and wellness conditions. And And then, I kept presenting to the board. And then 2022, after ChatGPT moment, when I went to the board meeting, the first question was, what is our AI strategy? And I was like, I've been presenting for the last 3 years, right? I showed the pathway where we are going, but then suddenly everyone realized that this is a paradigm shift that's happening. So that's good that what ChatGPT did was to bring AI to a use case that even our grandmoms or, our older to younger kids can take advantage. So that it made it easy. The complexity of how the models work behind the scenes is hidden. It's just so intuitive to use, and the value is very visible to everybody, right? My soon-to-be second grader built an app using obviously Replit, and just by giving prompts and all. And I was like, this moment was like, I was like, wow, this world is changing, and I think we have to accept the fact. So I think the point of this book was to give the story without going into too much, right? Because you can say this LLM is the best, and 6 months down the road there will be something else, right? Anthropic will come up with something, or OpenAI will do something, or even somebody new that we don't know might pop up suddenly, just like DeepSeek moment happened. So it's very hard to be a guru, but you have to look at the fundamentals. Like, you agree, we agree. I think I wanted to do was to showcase the use cases of what can be done looking forward. And I think use cases are more important. Like, what are the different healthcare use cases where this tool, AI tool, will create a paradigm shift, right? So it can go all the way to drug discovery, to DNA analysis, to what I say back-end work. Like back-end work, it means like, I was just talking to a friend, he runs a AI company, and they're building a solution where when you have these clinical trials and you are submitting these large number of FDA documentation, they're trying to auto-generate that, because that itself is a big, workflow that challenging. So main idea in the book was just to define those work streams, because many of the entrepreneurs are looking at, where should I play? What should I do, right? How do I be a part of this? So the simplest way would be that there are different domains in play right now. So there is a AI domain, right? So there is a AI domain which I say that the inside AI, which is the teams that are building the LLMs. And then there's a wrapper AI, which is people who are using those models to build some workflows and some solutions, right? So there are very few people in the world right now that are capable of, or have the skill sets to go the nuts and bolts of the AI, but there is there's a large population that can take that engine, which is an AI engine, and build a vehicle out of it, which is a solution or a workflow. So I think it's important that we understand the different work skills that are at play. So there is an AI play. Whether my understanding is that to go to the engine design, which is the LLMs, I think it's a very niche area, and there are people doing it, but I think it's a very it's a very high capital, high speed game right now. But there are solutions. You look for problems and say, can this be solved using this engine? What vehicle? I want to go to point A and B. How can take this engine and build a vehicle that can take me to a point A? And with that, I think a lot of people are playing a big role there. Then second domain is the medical domain itself, right? So let's take an example like DNA. So I have a friend whose company is doing deep models for DNA classification and all that. For that, the second domain is the knowledge base of how the whole DNA and RNA and how it works. Not everyone will have it, but somebody who has that knowledge plus somebody who has AI knowledge, skill sets and the product and the technology knowledge can build a solution around it, right? So I think every workflow that I listed in the book, they requires two skill sets, except one, which I call the administrative efficiencies, right? Whether it's the paperwork that needs to be generated, whether it's the FDA submissions that can be done, that's a model that somebody doesn't need deep knowledge. Drug discovery, for example, if you're doing molecular analysis, it requires that domain expert. If you are thinking of starting something in there, then you need to have that skill set or a co-founder or a team that both can come together, and that would be an ideal combination. But a lot of people have like background on, say, software, and they know how to use the models and all that. So then I think then the um, administrative workflow, or which I call the efficiency workflow. There are, where all the um, things that we do are not very efficient in this ecosystem, the healthcare ecosystem. They are very archaic and they are very intensive. And those can be um, made more efficient, higher productive. And those workflows can be AI'd, like we used to say automated, but like AI. So that I think is a nice kind of option for entrepreneurs if they're looking at, if they, how do I use and take advantage of this ecosystem. But obviously, if say you have somebody who has done a PhD in drug discovery, and then there's a guy who's a great computer scientist, and they can get together and build something together that crosses the two domains. I think I think that's even harder problem, and that have larger valuation, or I'll say so I think you have to, one of the question, I think when I think I was discussing with Manan, I think, so it was like, how do, what are the different, so I tried to put it in the book, like different 6 or 7 workflows where it can help. Remote patient monitoring is one, where they can be a solution. So, if you're looking from that angle, like if you're an entrepreneur and looking at like how do I, you have to understand this is still an area where data and then the governance requirements are there. So I think if depending on what your background is, you can choose that. But if you step back and say, what are the areas that will be impacted by AI? I think it's pretty much everything, right? It will be remote monitoring, it will be drug discovery, it will be personalized healthcare, it can be clinical trial. The clinical trial process is very cumbersome right now, very cumbersome, very manual, very document centric. That can be another opportunity. But everything will be impacted because at the end, I think humans are driven towards a solution that provides value in terms of financial value plus also the convenience. Right? So I'll give you an example. Like, when initially I heard about Airbnb many, many years ago, I was like, this is not possible. Like, who will let somebody stay in their home? You know, and same thing with Uber, right? But there was a two-sided benefit, right? The person who's using the service was getting a benefit that he or she can get a car, or like a taxi, or a vehicle, or a place to stay at a cost that is much typically lower than hotels and other options, and have more choices. And the other part was there is an excess asset inventory that was not being monetized, and that can be monetized. So that was the reason that people went over that psychological hump of allowing somebody to stay in their home or allowing somebody to sit in their car, right? Same thing here, right? Why AI is so interesting is because it brings value in terms of things you are doing. You can do it faster, cheaper, more efficiently, but also it can do things that will take much longer in a shorter period of time, and things that were not possible can become possible. And then things that are new opportunities and new things will come in. Like for example, drug discovery, you can detect molecules and others that will, without AI, will take decades. And here you can iterate different compositions much faster. And there are, I have a couple of friends that startups are doing that. So the limit is endless, right? I think, and then obviously when you have opportunity, you have risk also, right? One of the biggest risks or challenge, I won't say risk, but challenge in AI is the data. I mean, the data is the key, right? Like, the models that are being built, they will continue to become better and better. I think they are, and that to me is like a compiler. Like, you are, but the code that in this case is data. And I think that's where the challenge comes is whenever you're doing a solution, you have to think, is it public data that you are, leveraging, or is it um, pseudo public and private combined data? How's the data quality? How's the integrity? I think that's important, I think, and especially in the healthcare, I think, because hallucinations, you're finding something and hallucination happens, it's okay. But if it's in healthcare, and the probability of that will keep going down and down. But if it's somebody, life is at stake, I mean, then the tolerance for that is very low. The second thing is bias and fairness. I think that's very important because it's not intentional, but implicit biases can occur just because how you collected the data. So for example, if you're doing a clinical trial and you're some cream and it's mostly done on fair complexion, you can have all the results in the world, but if you might try it on a darker tone and it might work very differently because the data was not diverse enough. It didn't, it just unintentionally brought in bias or unfairness in this, right? So I think that will always be a challenge and a problem. And I think that when challenge and problem does not mean they're not unsolvable. It's just that when you do something, you see opportunities and upside. You also need to understand there are challenges that needs to be, I mean, there are companies working on it. There are techniques that are being, and this will continue because that will, that's the beauty of it, right? Then obviously the explainability of AI, right? So when you say something that this is, you feed some data and say this is the kind of for the output, like you should be able to explain, like if you have a CT scan and it says that this is might be the tumor, it should be trackable that why this diagnosis was done, right? So I think that will be important. And then the biggest elephant in the room is the integration and interoperability. Unlike the internet, which was open standards, connected, and standards were written that things can work. Routers, switches, Cisco makes one, and the company doesn't exist anymore, but Nortel or Juniper, they all work together because the protocols are standard and all that. And interoperability and standardization open doors for great amplification. Unlike that, unfortunately, in healthcare, I think it's still a closed system. Like EHR, EMRs are own. I think there are 2 or 3 companies that control most of it. Same thing is happening in AI, right? I mean, if you look at, no matter what you say, the AI are completely working in parallel. Like Anthropic AI, Claude versus OpenAI, versus Grok. They're completely different. There's no standards. There's no, and eventually it might come. I don't know, but I think especially in healthcare, the biggest challenge is the data availability and also the ease of integration in healthcare. I have a very close friend who's running the innovation arm at a big healthcare system, and he has 3 systems. They have an on-premise system and they have 2 different clouds. And the reason is that the hospital system acquired different companies over a period of time, and somebody was using AWS, somebody was using Google, and then there was on-premise. And these are incompatible systems. So I mean, this is the reality of the real world, like at 1,000 feet level, when you think ideally everything, if everything is standardized, everything is, but when you go deeper, you realize these are the bottlenecks that these startups and companies will have to face, and solutions will have to evolve. So I think that's important, I think. And then
This
uh,
is just, sorry, jumping in here, but I am hoping that we can use the last 20 minutes for
okay,
Q&A.
sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
so,
So let me just
sorry.
wrap up just
Yeah.
one. Just so I think the summary would be that even if something is possible, our given its healthcare, its life and death, I think there will always be that also the human level kind of acceptance that, for example, if you're talking to a chatbot and he's diagnosing, I think will humans still want like a physical doctor to validate? And I think that part is very important because that it's not just normal solution. It's a life and death kind of a situation. So it will be a nice learning. I mean, I didn't want it to solve anything there. I just wanted to highlight things and then show opportunities and challenges. So I'll stop here. I think I'm happy to take any answers or any comments.
With
So,
that, who has the next question? Okay, go ahead, Murad.
so I just out of curiosity, Faisal, like there were some recent studies saying that LLMs for creative work, like writing papers and stuff, is sort of dumbing down the kids who are using them, and they're not using their. So I'm wondering, as a doctor, if you have those assistants to help you, would your error rates go up? Like, is that a concern? Is that something that the industry worries about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think I'll take a step back because yes, I had a meeting with the university here yesterday, and they were defining the curriculum for software development. The reason I'm saying going back is that it's not just you doctors; it's more about every workflow is being impacted. And I'm going giving a talk on vibe coding and all there. And they were thinking, what should we do? Should we allow vibe coding? Should we, how will the basic software skills be developed if they are, and that's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge that, and there are different theories out there, and I'll come to that. But for example, calculator. I mean, my point is like calculator came out, right? iPhone came out before the smartphone came out. I used to remember 50 to 74 numbers like this, now I don't even remember my daughter's number because I just look at it and click on it, right? Because I don't remember what her number is, right? So maybe that part of our brain we stopped using, but we started using different elements. I think the balance is important, right? So for example, you still need to have the basic medicine. You need to have all that. I will say use it as a tool right now, right? So you still have human in the loop, make sure you do that, but just not like blindly without any, like say I'm not a doctor and I go to Chat GPT and you come to me and I say, okay, what, and they diagnose and pass it to you. That's not right. I'm saying that I can use that as a tool, then I'll use my judgment, my skills, my knowledge, and as an add-on. So I think in medicine, I will say human in the loop is important. I don't, again, I should not predict anything because things are moving very fast, but I'm hoping in our lifetime, I don't think completely autonomous diagnosis and all might be there. Even if it's possible technically, it might be not acceptable to the recipient, which is the patient. But I will say there are other skills will be developed, right? So I mean, so just like we had tools after tools, and we continue to up level like where we spend our time and our intellectual capacity, same thing will happen. So there will be something that will be, I don't remember any number. It looks like I'm like, I say like, I used to remember all the numbers like 20 years ago, but not anymore. But then I do a lot more things then, right? In that time and use my brain power somewhere else. So I think it will be, it's it's just every impact, right? Coding, they were worried about just basic programming. Should we teach them like, SDLC and, people can go and go to Cursor and, but the point is, if you don't have the foundation, then you don't have that level to evaluate the results. So if you blindly start taking it, then you write that code and you dump it and it stops working. Who will debug that, right? So I will say it will be a balance, and I think each organization will define their own boundaries, what will work, and there's no like universal kind of answer that thou shall all use this. Each organization will define their own constraints and boundaries in my mind. Yeah.
I think if I may jump in here to Murad's point, I think the point is in case here the cost of decisioning, right? You use the AI and machine learning. So Faisal, you brought up the example from the healthcare, right? So the cost of decision is very high. If you want AI to make autonomous decision and what false positive, false negative, you can actually allow. And for any sort of medical trial or any sort of medicine development, in those cases, you can have the p-value 0.0001, right? So, and then same thing for, I think, the autonomous vehicle, right? So now the question is, even one accident in 1 million, you're not going to get approved, right? But that might be still much better than human. But the question is here, who is going to take the ownership of the outcome? So there's a challenge. And second point you brought up in your talk, the standardization of the governance of the lots of AI model open source. I think my take on that is, if you look into our lots of first industrial revolution to industry 4.0, those innovations were industry specific, right? Let's say medical image processing. It was innovated for that specific industry. But AI is such a generic, it's like the potato. You can put it with any sort of recipe, right? You can eat it in any possible ways. So as a result, it's permeating to the different industries in the different form. But the people who invented all this transformer model and architecture, they didn't probably even anticipate where and how it can be used. So nobody's coming up with the governance. As a company, like to your point earlier, what's your AI strategy, the business strategy, planning, data strategy, and the governance? So you have to decide what's your level of tolerance for the AI application and how actually you want to democratize it, how it's impacting your customer's life, and how you want to control it. So I don't know. That's just the cycle. I think there's a responsibility of every chief AI officer and chief data officer. They have to figure it out. Like my take is that nobody is going to come up with it. Doesn't matter. It's in Brussels or Washington D.C.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to give you the framework, right? So that I think the probably the last mileage problem. How you can use it, because value is there, but the question is, can you really extract that value?
I mean, great point.
Faisal,
Two
as you answer these questions, there are also a couple of questions in chat.
So I think let me comment. I think Tao made a good point. So I think self-driving. So how many people remember there was an accident by Uber? I think, but how many know how many accidents humans have caused since then, right? So I mean, the point is that there's always a higher bar where human life is at stake, whether it's self-driving car or medicine, right? I think, and even if it's like you mentioned, better accuracy. Quantitatively, you can prove like, okay, it's only one accident versus human, you do X per year. It's still, that's not acceptable, right? So I think that will be the important part. I will say that governance point is also valid, that like FDA also, like before ChatGPT moment came in, FDA was slowly opening up to AI, right? So they came up with the good AI practices and how to use AI in it for diagnosis. The problem is that the challenge is that like whether it's self-driving car, like you have seen how many cars they hit, and then there's a cause and there's an effect, and there's a tight correlation between the two, right? You do this, this will happen. AI is not the same thing. You do something, something else will happen. When you look at the result, can you say, why did this happen? That's the explainability part, which is always hard, I think. So I think those challenges will be there. So it will be a mixture of, like, I agree with you, like whether it's Brussels, the Europeans are typically faster in coming up with whether it's CCPA or like other security standards and all. But the point is that the private organization, the Anthropic of the world, OpenAI, they're doing right now self-governance. Nobody is monitoring. There's not like U.S. government sitting there and saying these are the boundaries you're working against. So I think self-regulation will happen. What will be acceptable and what will not be acceptable, I think across all industries, not just healthcare, I think will be a mixture of some governance, some there. And I think the bigger elephant in the room, I think, which I forgot to cover, I think because of the time constraint, is I think who's responsible, liability, right? So same thing in self-driving car. If somebody hits it, is it Waymo? Is it the software engineer who wrote the code, or is it the NVIDIA GPU? So my point is, it's always that part, I think, and that always lags. I think that the legal, these things always react. They're not proactive, that they see where the world is going 10 years from now, and let me make rules that can, and rules should always be a framework. You're not, because you don't know how fast things are changing. You cannot, otherwise you will be constantly giving rules every second day. You have to define a pathway and let the people innovate in there while not disturbing, and then at the end, once things settle down, right? It's like boiling right now, like AI is boiling right now, right? So nobody can say, I know, because 2 months later, something else will happen. And I don't think that's the right way, but you give a boundary that thou shalt not kill, right? And then I think, and then start building those guardrails. It will be a private sector and the government and everyone else, like, what's acceptable or not. I think I don't have the answer, like what will be, but I think it will self-regulate over time. And we have done it as humanity for many times,
So do you think that the auditability of these models is going to have to come a long way? I know that the prediction space is so abstract for how these decisions are made in the models, as far as like with transformers and like how positional coding works and across the span. So trying to kind of delineate how the decisions are made. I know that Anthropic's kind of doing something now where they're kind of doing like an MRI of how the activation sequences work. But do you think audibility tools are going to be coming to the forefront pretty soon as far as how these models are making decisions? I think it's one of the reasons why the government's so hands off to want to touch them in a lot of these kind of implementations. So where do you think that's going to be in the next couple of years?
I think so. That's an area where we have to evaluate especially the regulated industry, right? I mean, audibility, explainability will be very important. How do they do it? I think again, you mentioned Anthropic. I think it has to be done by the big guys, the 3 or 4 big guys. Right now, it's like there are 4 big players right now, right? I mean, Anthropic, OpenAI, Grok, and maybe Google. I hope they catch up. So I think and then some smaller players. But I think it has to be done because that will be that's important because cannot be. I mean, the way AI works and especially transform, it's a black box. Right? You cannot say A plus B plus C equal to D. Right? That causality is not there.
Yeah.
They will have to come with something that can at least give some confidence that it's not a Wild West out there. It's some guidelines. But right now the focus is a lot more on making the model faster and sexier rather than that. But eventually, I agree with you, that will be the pathway. So again, right now it's so fast. The speed is to I just saw that Anthropic went to 176 billion valuation from 650 in 9 months or 6 months. This is never heard of in my lifetime. I've never seen, I think so, and not all of us, right? So I mean, this is a new world right now, and I don't know how it will settle. So I cannot be the guy who predicts that this will happen, but I expect this should happen. I mean, I feel that should be the requirement, but when will it happen, I don't know.
Linda, over to you.
Thanks very much. This has been a great discussion. I just want to go back to the topic of AI. Is it going to replace physicians, and or will it be sort of a consultation tool, a decision support tool, and so on? MIT Technology Review and a number of studies have been finding that individuals, if they use AI as a supplement to their mind, but they keep their minds very active, they can increase their productivity and even their IQ by, not their IQ, but their productivity by many-fold, like 10 to 15 times, and elevate their, working IQ. And I think that I'm worried that we may be moving toward a very, very smart, small subset of people who are collaborating with AIs, especially LLMs, and kind of everyone else who's really legitimately afraid of having their jobs taken. I was just wondering what you think about that, and especially in the medical space, since you're a doctor.
Yeah. So I think one thing I will say before I answer your questions, I think we always mention that in many of my talks is I've seen a picture of Macy's Day Parade in 1906, and it was all horse carriages and one Ford T model. And 1915, it's all Ford cars and a couple of horse carriages, right? So 9 years, 10 years, the world changed. Whether you like it or not, it will change, right? So I think it's, first of all, the guidelines. I always work through frameworks and guidelines. So you cannot resist change. It's happening. How do you adapt and how do you use it to your benefit is the key, right? So I think you touched upon a point about, so the way I see it is there's artificial intelligence and there's augmented intelligence. I'm a big believer in augmented intelligence where human plus AI work together to be better collectively rather than AI replacing humans. There will be jobs replaced, but that's because AI gives higher productivity, right? So like, for example, if I'm starting a software company now, I used to build models at how much my headcount will increase. Right now, it will be 1/10 of that. It's just not because because their tools are so good that instead of hiring 10 engineers, I'll hire 3, right? So that automatically implicitly reduce the job market. So there will be replacement. But I feel, again, it's my opinion, that augmented intelligence, where human plus machine, work together to, whether it's in medical or other place spaces, will be a better solution and will be a better one. Second point you mentioned about your diminishing capacity if you use it, I think it depends on you, right? For example, like, if the person itself is intellectually challenging, right? And using, so if you just go to ChatGPT and take something and dump it somewhere, right? So like, then write somewhere else, then you're not using your, but you can, if you're writing something, say, what about this thing? And you go to ChatGPT and say, well, can you tell me a little bit of a background of that? Then you read it, you say, okay, but you're still creating yourself, but using it as a tool, then you will continue to be more productive and you will still be challenging. So I think that each of us will have to make that decision, right? That we, how do we intellectually challenge ourselves, learn, continue to adapt, but use it as a tool. There is a replacement with the fear about jobs going away, but it's not because it will. There are many few industries where it will be completely botified or agentified, right? But it will, because the productivity is so high that you don't need that many resources anymore, right? There will be jobs replaced. It's just any transition that came in our history, where like industrial revolution or anything, the productivity went up, new jobs were created, old jobs were impacted. So that will happen. How much? I don't know.
I thanks for those comments. I didn't so much mean to bring up the old debate about is AI going to take over everyone's job, as it's difficult to explain to people, I found, how to keep using your intellect while using an LLM. And it's been shown, like, for example, like the Khan Academy with education. There's some children who really take off at learning math or coding with AI help. But there are many other kids who just can't engage their minds with it. And so maybe what I'm really talking about is more of a problem in the US education system.
Thank you. What an insightful discussion. Really enjoyed all the points you made, Faisal, and all of the questions. I have two questions. So you mentioned about bias and data, which is very valid and definitely resonates. I wanted to also get your thoughts on ethics. So what is your thoughts on, making sure by we meaning, like the companies are acting ethically and with integrity in AI healthcare?
Yeah, I think that's again, Mamta, I think great point. I think ethics is the foundation, I think, and they have to incorporate it. But again, the question is, when you say companies, there are every company, whether it's a healthcare organization, whether it's a medtech company, whether it's just a normal company, I think that should be the governance. I mean, if it's a private company, from the board, I think it will come down that whatever AI has been used in the company, there are guidelines, there are policies that are established to follow ethical procedures. The companies that are building these the big guys, I think that also have to be able to showcase that they are using whatever they're building is within the ethical guidelines and following the policies, whether it's through the government, which is very rare, because I think the policies of most of the developing countries is let the private sector and the innovation, give them boundary that thou shalt not kill, and but then you play around and create something where. So I think it will be across everything, right? So and the policies will be established organization by organization. There's not like a global thing, but the foundation is that you have to be just like climate, right? A lot of organizations are very climate centric. That green and they define in all their procedures. So I think it will be policies that will become part of the company DNA, that they are they have these guidelines that they allow that, right? So still,
Yeah.
the problem is that these policies that are made by the individuals, sorry to say, they are not moving at the speed where the innovation is happening, right? So
Yeah.
it's always lagging, right? So I think it will take time.
Mhm.
Like if you look at most of the board in North America. Those people, I mean, I'm part of like organization that they do private boards and all that. We're still discussing how to think about AI and how to think about, so it's still, there's a lagging factor, but the governance policies in private organizations are set by the board. And I
Yeah,
think, yeah.
definitely. I think everyone has a responsibility. I know we're running short on time, and I want to just go a little bit deeper. And I don't think anyone has the answers, and I'm not just putting it on you, Faisal, but I just wanted to get your thoughts. So, I've been part of this organization called Pugwash that Albert Einstein started a long, long time ago because for ethics and integrity in STEM and tech, because any technology could be used for good and harm. So far we've been on the surface and talking about the risks, but let's go a little bit deeper. What about the dangers of using this for like causing big harm, right? Like in medtech and like, for example, bioweapons and all kinds of scenarios. So again, I don't think any one person has answers on
Yeah.
this. So, but what
That
are
also
your
sounds like
thoughts?
a full next talk, by the way,
Yeah,
that we
but
can
I
get
just
into.
wanted to get your thoughts. Like, where do you think like government
Faisal, here's the
fits?
challenge. The answer needs to come under 1 minute to
Under
that,
1 minute. Okay, let me do my best.
so
Yeah.
that we can wrap this
So,
up.
so I think the harm, the point you mentioned, I think there will be anything you do in life, like take guns. So guns can be used to protect and feel safe, or they can be used to cause harm. So that's why we come up with policies and guidelines and ethical standards of what's allowed, what's not allowed. Like this age, you don't have a gun. So I think those things will continue in healthcare also. There will always be bioweapons can still be made. Now the question is, AI is a tool where you can do faster, and then obviously that has to be, so that's like anything, any tool that comes in, there will have to be guidelines, and I think we have to hold the companies accountable, right? Like companies have to, maybe like there's an ethical policy that how they are using ethical AI, and in that the consumers ask for it, the organization have to prove that they are doing it, and that puts the onus on them. So again, just to summarize, any new thing that we ever done as in humanity can be used for good and bad. I think what you do is we define boundaries and constraints, and as a collective, to make sure that that doesn't, happen. Yeah, I think we have to keep an eye on it, and we have to hold every company accountable that they are doing it. And I think the more you put the onus on the company, the more they have to prove that they are doing it, and that's the challenge. It's not a one-time thing. We'll have to continue doing it.
Yeah,
So I hope
it's
1
continuous.
minute. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Faisal, and
Thank you.
everyone who's joined.
Thank you.
Faisal, especially you again for all the questions that you've answered. This was really interesting.